Hey guys, welcome back to Focused on Fins Live. Um, Back today with my co-host, as always, Anthony. Anthony and I have been off the air talking for about a half hour now. I guess we'll find out whether or not we still have enough to talk about here or not. But been a little cold up here lately. Snow is almost gone there. But Anthony, I know you love the snow, so I'm going to give you a minute off the top here to share your thoughts on the snow that you've had there recently.
I already did my venting. I don't even want to relive it any more than I already have. But I can tell you right now, anybody that deals with snow dams or anything like that, you have, all of my heart and sympathy. And I suggest heated gutters because I tell you right now, or a flamethrower is going to be what I do next year. I won't even let the flurries hit the ground. Like I'll be standing in the yard when it's getting ready to snow.
Yeah, I get it. I've been there. Thankfully, we did not get as much here. Snow is almost completely gone here in central Pennsylvania, and hopefully that's the last of any snow we're going to get for this year. But not here to spend too much time on the weather. As always, we're going to take questions and comments and answer everything that we can as we get them in here. So feel free to put them in the chat. But wanted to start off kind of circling back to some stuff that we talked about last week, or some questions that we had last week that we didn't necessarily have answers on. That's something we're going to continue to try to do here. That if you ask questions on players that we haven't watched or things that we haven't considered, right, we want to make sure that we answer those even if it's a week later. So one of the questions that came up last week was whether or not I had watched, and I'm going to try this pronunciation for the first time, right? So Max Ihachinor, that's not right, but you know who I'm talking about, the Arizona State right tackle. I was asked about him last week, somebody I had not looked at, but I did go back and I watched him, and I like what's there, right? This is a guy, 6'6", 325, has long arms, just recently started playing football, right? He was a multi-sport athlete playing soccer and basketball, didn't start playing football until 2021, started at the JUCO level. And then, when you consider that he only started playing, 5 years ago, playing at Arizona State's a pretty big jump for that, right? And this is a guy, he is going to be a developmental prospect. But when you look at the way that he moves, you can see the work that he has put in. And, his movement skills and techniques are ahead of a lot of guys in this draft already, right? So I like him. I don't see him as a immediate starter. I think that he's a big guy that's still learning how to play big. There's still times that he gets kind of pushed around, especially in pass pro. And it's like, I see it at the high school level where I coach, that sometimes you get a big kid that is strong, but he doesn't know how to play that way, right? And there's a point where the light comes on where he's like, I am no longer going to get pushed around. I'm the biggest guy in the room, right? And that's kind of where I figure that Max is right now, right? I think that he's going to come in, and the level of confidence he's shown so far is impressive. But I think he's going to get to the NFL, and there's going to be a light that comes on for him where he's like, hey, I can play with these guys in the NFL. And, the ceiling is sky high. And that's all projection, right? That has to happen for him. But I think that he is there. He's definitely a guy that I would, day two, especially if we get late into day two and he's still on the board, I would love to get him in here and see how he can develop. But yeah, those are my thoughts on him. Have you watched Max? I'm going to just say Max. And do you have any additional thoughts you want to put in there?
So I think it's Iheanacho,
Okay.
but okay, don't quote me on it though. I'm
Better
sure
than
we'll
me,
hear.
that's for sure.
We got how many days left until the draft? I'm sure we'll hear another 20 iterations of that.
Yeah, I usually don't worry
um,
about pronunciations until the Dolphins have drafted players, so that's probably the last attempt you're gonna hear until he becomes a Miami Dolphin, hopefully.
yeah, we gotta find a nickname for him or something, right? Like you said, or maybe just Max. Yeah, he's on the Jordan and Kobe level where he's just one name basis. Um, No, I have not watched the tape, but like I said, I've heard a lot of good talk about him. McShay spent some time, and like I said, he's Nigerian. He played soccer, so I think that's where you're seeing the feet, and the movement where he's very coordinated. Which, right, that's a big thing for the big guys, right? Is whether or not their feet can match, what they want to do and the movements. And then I totally agree with the whole idea. Like I've seen that as well for players, and that is definitely a thing where again this is a new game for him. He's probably so. And again, I'm guessing here, but a guy that's probably learning the game is probably so focused on the technicalities and the fundamentals that he's almost forgetting. Like, dude, I'm a big guy. I can just punish this guy and get him out of the way. So when, like you said, when those worlds collide, is when you could potentially have something really special there.
Absolutely. Um, so we do have a couple of questions coming into the chat early. Definitely appreciate that.
Sweet.
Uh, so first one that we have in here from Dan Hollywood Gold. I'm genuinely concerned with this edge room, even post draft, knowing that Green Bay execs have not spent large amounts of money in free agency. What is this edge room going to be? Says he can't count on Chop. Um, and we will see how, John Eric Sullivan, whether how much he stays in line with what Green Bay does. And I think that he will, for the most part. He has talked about Ron Wolf quite a bit. So I think that that's the kind of foundation that he's looking to build there. Green Bay has shown, I don't want to say a tendency, but more so a willingness to go out and spend for the right players. But the Dolphins really don't have that kind of money to do that right now. And I think this edge conversation kind of leads into something that you and I were talking about off air. And we're not going to get into it too much because I think that you and I both want to do a lot more work on this. But Halfley had talked about wanting to be able to play both a 3-4 and a 4-3 defense, and to be able to do that with the same personnel. And I think that's something that we need to keep in mind when we talk about this edge room. Um, so I think that when I look at the types of edges that I think Miami could target, right? I see guys like Gabe Yakus and Malachi Lawrence, those 4-3 defensive ends that can stand up a little bit as well. So I think the edge room obviously needs more bodies, right? We let go of Bradley Chubb. Chop Robinson is basically last man standing there. But at the same time, it's kind of a clean slate there as well, that you can fill that room up with the type of guys that are going to fit what Jeff Halfley wants to do defensively. So I like this edge group. I think that even getting into day 2 and 3, you can find guys that can contribute day 1. And you're not going to go out and find an elite pass rusher in free agency, but I do think there are going to be options of guys that are cap friendly that you can sign there. So yeah, I get being concerned with the edge group today, but you could say the same thing about the defensive tackle room last year at this time, that we had that exact same concern, and they went and tripled down in the draft to fill that up. So what are your thoughts here on the edge room and what it could be going forward?
No, very very well said. And I was probably going to touch on some of the same points. I think one of the biggest things is, and it's not really a cop out, but we have to keep in mind that not every problem is going to be fixed and solidified this year with the person that it's going to be for the next 5 years or even 3 years. Some of these holes are just going to have to be plugged for a year, or two at max with again some low level cheap free agents just to kind of fill out the roster. And, and then you move on to next year and you try to fill it next year, right? Like they're building a team. Again, the whole saying that, it wasn't built in a day, eh, that's where we are, so some of these things we're going to have to be patient. You can't point at any certain position and say I want it fixed now. If Miami does do this draft properly and they play the best player available game in the draft, we'll see maybe edge is the one that benefits the most, maybe it's somewhere else. But regardless of how that goes and how free agency goes, there are going to be moves that are probably made later on in the summer when Miami does get some more money available to them as well after June 1st, and that's probably where you'll see maybe a couple more additions. But again, the bottom line is that exactly what Eric said. We're trying to find some guys that can do both. There's some guys in the draft that fit that bill. We want to see Chop play and hopefully develop so we don't have to look for somebody to replace him. And again, not everything is going to be fixed this offseason.
Absolutely. So next question that we have from IA Figueroa. Two players he's asking about. So what do you guys think of Keelan Rutledge, and what about the tackle from Georgia? And that tackle from Georgia is Monroe Freeling. So I have not watched Rutledge. Have you watched him at all?
No, and so this is going to be all you being the offensive line guy, but I do want to throw this in there real quick. I don't know if it was a tweet or I listened to it. I think I heard it on a pod, but I believe one of the first days of the Senior Bowl when Keelan Rutledge was there, the word was that they had to tell him to like calm down 2 or 3 times because he was just so intense during drills. I was like, yeah, dude, let me get that guy. That guy likes to headbutt the wall with no helmet on before the game. Like, we need a little bit of that.
A little bit of Richie Incognito, huh?
Mm-hmm. So that's what I had in my head.
So I have not watched Keelan Rutledge. So I just made a note of that. So like we talked about at the top, this will be something that I look at before next week. So make sure you check in next week for my opinion on him. But the other one, Monroe Freeling, so tackle from Georgia, right? And there's been a lot of buzz about him lately, and I was kind of late checking in to watch him. I'm a big fan, right? And he's just a very smooth looking player. His technique's on point, looks very effortless. The feet are patient. Going through my notes, got good anchor in pass pro. I think he is very scheme versatile. He's got the athleticism to play in his own blocking scheme, but he can still get it done in the short area, gap, and power schemes as well. And can get out in space, talking about screens and pulling stuff like that. I don't think he's going to flash as much as some of the others. He's not going to, have to drive the guy into the ground type blocks that everybody gets excited about. But he is a first round offensive tackle, very much in the offensive tackle number one conversation for me. The big point I would make here is that I don't know what the Dolphins are going to do offensive line wise in the draft. Sounds like they were or are trying to shop Austin Jackson. I don't see Austin Jackson necessarily being a cut candidate, and I understand the concerns with Austin Jackson, but those are all around health, right? We talk about what you want. You want players that are cap friendly, right? You want guys that are good locker room guys. You want guys that are good on the field, right? And you want guys that stay healthy. And Austin Jackson is all of that except for the staying healthy part. So I don't think the Dolphins, and maybe they'll prove me wrong, right? But I don't see them in a position to just go and cut a player like Austin Jackson, who, yes, there's the risk of, if he gets injured, that you're paying him a bunch of money to not play. But at the same time, I think he's still only 25 years old. There's still, there's still upside there, and he's still a good player when he is on the field. So I think that whether or not they can find a trade partner for Austin Jackson would go a long way to deciding whether someone like Monroe Freeling is even in the conversation at number 11. I don't think there's any chance that he's around as we get to the second round there. But overall, just offensive line wise, if they return Austin Jackson, I think that Jonah is going to get first chance to start at left guard. You don't, even though it was a previous regime that drafted him, right? It was Miami Dolphins assets that were used to trade up for him a second round pick, and chances are that Halfley and Sullivan had a fairly high opinion of him as well. So I think they're going to at least give him a chance to do that. So when if, like I said, if you return Austin Jackson, you're kind of looking at 4 of the 5 positions probably already at least penciled in to have the players on there. So I'm not sure that you're going to see, like I've seen talk of Vega from Penn State being in that conversation at 11. I got to do more work on him. I don't think that I'm crazy about him at 11, but I'm not sure that interior offensive line is going to be a direction the Dolphins as a whole go in the first round, because there are position groups like edge, right, that have much bigger needs than what the offensive line does overall. So, Anthony, have you watched Monroe Freeling at all, or do you have any thoughts just in general on strategy as far as the offensive line in the draft?
I have not watched him, but the biggest thing too, at least for myself, is we've heard about Maui Noah and Fano for a while now. Those are right tackles, where Monroe is a left, and he doesn't really have. I think he had like 18, maybe like a total of 35 snaps over the course of 2 or 3 seasons, I think, at right tackle. So I wouldn't say that like he's comfortable there. And I don't like changing guys' position in general. I get sometimes it works. I would just rather not. So I don't really look at Monroe as like a guy that Miami should target. I mean, if he's there, there's never a shortage of teams that want tackles. I would think if, Miami moves back, or something, just hypothetical, right? Because we're not really looking at him at 11, but he's definitely not going to be there at 45, but let's say that they move back, to 18 or 15 or whatever, some team, like I could easily see Monroe Freeling being the reason a team comes up to get him. He wouldn't be for us, but I could 100% see a team, that needs a left tackle jumping up to grab him. So yeah, but I'm with you, as far as the offensive line and as a whole goes. I'm ready to move on from Austin Jackson, but again, I want to do it at the right time. I don't want to do it just to do it, leave ourselves, like empty-handed almost, on the right side. So when the time is right, we can do that. If, best player available ends up being, Maui Noah at 11 or something, right? And you picture him as a right tackle and you want to get him in there immediately, fine. Maybe you play him at right guard for a year, which some people like him more at guard than tackle anyway. And then, you kick him outside next year, whatever the case may be. But, again, it's kind of, we're kind of just taking it as it goes right now, to be honest with you, because again, there's still moving parts. And I haven't watched a ton of tackles myself to say, hey, this is a plan that I have for the late round.
Yeah. And that's a good point that you had made about Monroe Freeling being the type of player that a team could come up for, because, there's a lot, I feel like probably 85% of people that do mock drafts always want to trade down, acquire more picks, right? It's a dream scenario. My argument a lot of times for that is who's coming up, right? Yes, you can want to trade down as much as you want, but you always have to have somebody that is willing to come out, and you have to have the players that are worthy of coming up, right? If you're sitting there at number 11 and you don't have players that you love at number 11, well, what's to say that another team is going to, have players they love that they want to come up? But when we look at the Dolphins situation at left tackle, I do like what you're saying there. Like that could be an opportunity, right? If a team decides they want to come up, and if they see Monroe Freeling as the top left tackle in the draft, then that's a realistic possibility. So that could be the value for Freeling for the Dolphins, is that somebody decides that they want to come up and get him, and they're willing to pay a handsome price to do it. So that's just a thought that I had there. Going back to IA Figueroa again, another topic we had on there. Love when you guys
Ooh,
ask questions, kind of keep us going. So, one of the things, and I forget whether it was Soley or Halfley. I think you said that it was Soley that had mentioned,
I believe
the
so.
receiver room, right? And that he doesn't envision them having a room of 5'9" receivers. And, this question, who's y'all's favorite wide receiver in the draft who can complement Waddle as wide receiver one? And then he clarified he means as, the player coming in being wide receiver number two. And I think that one of the things to think about here, right, with John Eric Sullivan saying that is that the receivers that we focus on when we're going through this mock draft process should be those players that are a little bit bigger, right? We have to add size to that room. And I haven't done a whole lot of work on wide receivers. I think you have a big receiver that I think that you're going to want to talk about here, Anthony. But like the receivers that I've looked at so far, you got Tate out of Ohio State, who has good size at 6'2". You got Jordan Tyson, 6'1". Makai Lemon is only 6 foot, and then Casey Concepcion at 5'11". So I really haven't looked at the big receivers too much yet, but I think that those are going to be the type of guys that, I think that we're going to see at least one receiver that's over 6'2" added during this draft process. But turn it over to you, Anthony. Your thoughts on this question and any receivers that you like.
Yeah. So I've done a good amount of, watching the receiver class. I would still like to get into a little bit more game tape on each of them just to really solidify and drive home how I feel. But that aside, yeah, I mean, I think we've been, clamoring for this for how long, that we need some size. I mean, I know we have the most accurate guy, but it's not like we want to be trying to throw, at the smallest catch radius possible. Size helps. We saw that with Gesicki in the red zone and all that, right? So again, we know that size helps. Cardell Tate would be a fantastic fit. I mean, there's no doubt about it. He's a pretty complete receiver. I'm curious to see kind of how he runs. There was something about him the first time I watched where he felt like maybe there was a little bit of this, just, I don't know, this bust vibe, right? Not that I was saying he was one, but I'm like, I could see this guy not being what we think he's going to be, right? We see that sometimes with the bigger guys, right? Like, do you remember? I don't know if you remember guys like Dorial Green Beckham, Corey Davis. Some of these guys are like super talented, but for whatever reason, I mean, even as early back as Keon Coleman, right? Like the Bills are dealing with that now, where some of these bigger guys are athletic and they make the coolest catches you've ever seen, but they can't separate. They don't know how to, their release package and things like that at the line of scrimmage are not up to par, where they're giving up, too much of their chest and they can't beat press, even though you just think that they're big and they can beat it no problem. Like, it doesn't happen at the NFL level. You have to be complete, right? So again, he's one, but I think Denzel Boston is another one. I think Denzel Boston's a very good football player. Chris Bell is kind of freakish, but he's hurt right now. He's 6'2", like 230. He's big, he's big, and he shined in that Miami game for people down in Florida, I'm sure, that watched, where guys like his size and like his weight are not really supposed to move like that. And so he's up there, and I think if he wasn't hurt, he'd probably be going a little bit higher. Omar Cooper Jr. is another 6 foot guy that I really like. He's starting to pick up a lot of traction right now. Somebody that I personally really like, I'll kind of wrap it up with a couple more here. Elijah Surratt, I really like him. I think he showed some really good route running ability and some savviness, which is what I prefer and like the most. And I actually think that that's probably what right now Miami needs, is somebody that can get open, somebody that can win one-on-one, somebody that can move the chain, somebody that can make tough catches across the middle. And again, like Waddle's the big play guy, so we need the possession guy, right? It's about creating balance. At least that's the kind of style and offense that I prefer. And I think Surratt, maybe ran a little bit of a limited route tree just because Indiana looked like they could kind of do whatever they wanted to do. But I just think that the way he does do those things, like you knew it was coming and he was still getting open and they were catching the back shoulders and he's got the late hands. He just gives me like these Keenan Allen, Devontae Adams kind of vibes. And I'm not saying that's the level he's going to be on, but that's just the type of receiver. I mean, if he was a poor man's those, I would be happy, right? Um, so again, he's somebody that I really like. And then, Malachi Fields is somebody that I was surprised myself that I liked as much. Chris Brazzell is a very interesting guy. He's like 6'5", just monstrous, can run. And then the last one I wanted to wrap up with was, I'm missing it now, but I actually like Kendrick Law. He's 6 foot. He's about 6 foot, and to me, he's pretty dynamic. And I think he's just a good all around receiver. He was at Bama before he transferred to Kentucky, and I'm not the biggest college football watcher, but I remember him from Bama, and I had caught him, like somebody had mentioned him, and I'm like, Kendrick Law, why does that sound so familiar? And when I dug in, I'm like, oh, that dude, I liked him a lot. That's so cool, So it was that kind of thing. But yeah, bottom line is that I think Miami will have plenty of opportunities, and there's some good prospects. Not all of them are going to be good. Yeah, it's just that's the law of averages and how the NFL draft works. But there is plenty of opportunity for Miami to grab, a big guy that does complement Waddle. They should not walk out of the draft without one.
All right, so you put a lot of names out there. I'm gonna put you on the spot here, right? So
Yeah.
if one of these guys starts falling a little bit and Miami's able to get him, like let's just call it a good draft value, right? What's Give me one or two names on that list, right? And keep the answer short here. That you would really be excited if the Dolphins came away with on draft night.
Okay, I'll say if they were to end up with, I think he's a top, he's probably a top 50 prospect. I will say that if Miami were to grab Elijah Surratt at 75, I would be ecstatic if he were to fall that far. Um, I think if Miami were to somehow end up in a position where they took Carnell Tate at 11, I wouldn't be angry at it. I prefer other guys, but I wouldn't be angry. Um, and then I'll say if they can get Malachi Fields just in the same, let's say at 90, I would be very happy.
See, I tell you, can you give me two, and you end up giving me three anyways. So,
Can't you're
but
talking my receivers, man. It's my language, man.
so let me ask you this, because I haven't
Yeah.
watched, like I said, I haven't watched many wide receivers, but I did see somebody kind of mentioning um, Elijah Surratt and feeling like he was more of a tight end than a wide receiver. And okay, I can see by your look you don't agree with that.
6'2", 213.
Oh yeah, I that would be a very surprising one.
That would be an
Like I said,
interesting tight end. We're going to start a whole trend here and change the landscape of the NFL if we're doing that.
right? No, I haven't watched him, but I was curious on your thoughts there, and you made them very clear with your facial expressions on that one. Um, so moving along, kind of touched on this player earlier. Gabe Yakus, is that one that you've watched yet in the edge room?
Um, so I haven't watched the game tape yet, but I did watch again surface level. I liked what I saw. He's 270. I think he moves a little bit better than the weight looks, at least from again first, surface level watch. And then it's actually pretty cool. I came across like a Big Ten video, I guess, where it just kind of was like, hey, here's the spotlight player, and it was him, and you just kind of learned and saw what he was about. I'm like, that's a dude that fits. So I definitely think he's in consideration. And then obviously I reached out to you, and just during our conversations back and forth, a little bit worried about how quick these edges are going to come off the board. That might be the territory that Miami's looking at 43, where, those first 8 to like 10 guys do come off the board. And, there's not going to be the opportunity to get a Zion Young or anything or somebody like that, we've both kind of like
Yeah, and that's so as we get into the
33
conversation,
inch arms.
yeah, 33-inch arms is very nice for an edge player. This is the type of player that I think is what Halfley will value when he's talking about that ability to switch between a 4-3 and a 3-4. Because from what I saw, Yakus played mostly as a stand-up edge, but he did put his hand in the dirt playing in that, 4-eye and 5-tech alignments. I feel like he does a good job taking on blocks in the run game, has the strength to hold ground, shed, and make the play. And he like why I see him as more of a second round pick than pushing up into that first round is that like when you look at him, like he looks like he should be an explosive pass rusher, but doesn't necessarily play that way, right? He's more consistent than he is flashy in that regard. I'm going to be really interested to see how he does over these next couple days at the combine. Um, for me, I think that where he fits in as far as draft slot is going to be how much more do you think you can get out of him as a pass rusher? Because I do think that there is the physical elements are there for him, but I don't feel like he necessarily puts it together on the field in the pass rush regard. But I think this is a very good all around player that has that position flexibility. I think you're going to be able to move around, and as work from that hybrid defense, this can be a guy that can play standing up over a tight end, but can also put his hand in the dirt and play as a 4-3 defensive end as well.
Just
So
for
thanks for
reference, sorry, I
yep.
just wanted to chime just for the measurables, just because this is a topic that you and I have been discussing recently. Rashawn Gary, 6'4", 275, 34 and an eighth inch arms. So
Okay.
similar to Gabe, where he's 6'3", 270 with that 33-inch arms. As far as where does he align, right? So he might be your D end and your Rashawn Gary role would be maybe how he fits into the Jeff Hafley defense as far as if you're playing the chess game and moving the pieces. Also, just a quick reference too, he was 72nd, I believe, on PFF's big board the other day. He's moved up to 45. Means nothing. Just felt like it was noteworthy because it was starting spots. It's a whole round.
Yeah, that's interesting for a publication like PFF to have that big of a jump. I mean, they've graded him all year. I wonder why they suddenly have him jumping up further. I don't like to get into the arm length conversation too often. I mean, 33 is obviously where you want it to be, but that did kind of remind me of some tweets that I saw earlier related to Ruben Bain and Cassius Howell. Somebody, Mark Mosher had tweeted out that Ruben Bain came in officially under 31 inches, and that there's never been an edge rusher drafted inside the top 100 with sub 31-inch arms. Bain came in at 30 and 7/8, and then
Interesting.
Cassius Howell coming in even shorter than that at just over 30 inches, and those two players were compared on this other chart from Matt Miller, right, saying about arm lengths for the top 10 sacker producers in 2025, and they were all 32 inches or more, right? So don't want to say that arm length is the end all be all by any means, right? But it's also not something I think can be completely ignored. So moving to the next one, Jaden Roberts, have you checked him out at all? This is a guard out of Alabama.
I was going to say, I thought that was a guard, but no, I have not. Just a quick little live update, just because I think it's fun. Grayson Holton, 36.5-inch vertical, the third highest of any defensive tackle at the combine in the last 20 years.
Oh, wow. And that's, when you're talking about vertical
Explosive
for a
kid.
defensive tackle, like that's explosion, right? That is a 40-yard dash may not translate for a defensive tackle, but a vertical jump, when you talk about the explosion off the line, that is a metric that definitely translates for defensive tackles. So Jaden Roberts, I need to get further into his film, right? But early during the college season, I had gone on a draft show with the draft professors and done some early season offensive line scouting, and Jaden Roberts was on that list. And I had a very high opinion of him then. The notes that I had on him is he has like almost a Tyron Smith type build for an offensive lineman, like kind of almost a Greek god type thing. Um, creates a lot of movement at the point of attack, and I felt like he did a good job squaring up defenders at the second level as well. So I need to do more work on Jaden Roberts, but based on what I've seen so far, I do have a very high opinion of him. I expect him to, be pretty far up there as far as interior offensive line prospects. Moving on to our next one, going back to IA Figueroa, with Minka being swung around in the trade sweepstakes and Caleb Downs possibly being a pipe dream at 11, who's y'all's best fit in Hafley's scheme in the draft, particularly in the early rounds? So for me, I love Caleb Downs as a player, right? I don't have anything bad to say about Caleb Downs, with the exception of I have a hard time seeing a scenario where we get to 11 and Caleb Downs is my highest rated player left on the board, right? There are just some very good players at positions that are premier positions on the roster, right? And so I like Downs. I would not have a problem with him at 11, but I don't necessarily see him being the top player on my board when we get to 11. Talking about best safety fit in Hafley's scheme, I don't really have a great answer to that. Anthony's probably going to do a better job of talking about scheme fits. And as far as early round safeties, I mean, Downs would be, would have no issues with that. Dylan Thieneman is obviously another one I think that every franchise is going to be pretty excited if they end up with. But I think Anthony knows where I'm going with my, favorite safety is somebody I watched kind of recently. So Michael Taff out of Texas, and this is not an early round guy, right? This is maybe around 3, probably looking into day 3 more likely. I just love watching this guy play, right? He's probably a little bit undersized, not sure how he's going to run, might be a little bit on the slower side, and that's going to go a long way towards figuring things out for him. But this is one of those guys, right? High energy, high IQ. You never have to question his effort on a play. You never have to question whether he's making business decisions. And he's just, pretty versatile. So that's a player that I like. I know that Anthony's about to list 20 safeties that he likes. So I'm going to turn it
16.
over to him now. 16. That's because I listed 3 already.
Yeah. No, so for me, I liked a lot of these guys at the surface level watch, which again, just for clarity, I watch kind of, a couple minutes of each, get an idea what they are. Do I like them? Am I interested? Am I excited, about watching them? Now I'm starting to get into the tape and have completed some of that. Dylan Thieneman is my guy. That dude is awesome, and he can do everything that Jeff Hafley is going to want him to do. I mean, this past year, I'm like, this dude is basically playing in the box and playing middle linebacker. It's like, it's wild. And he's just kind of hanging out in the middle, making plays, trying to, doing a little bit of everything. But I went back and watched like his Purdue tape, when he was there prior to Oregon, and when he was just playing over the top. I mean, some plays are hilarious because like he's playing like 18, 20 yards off the ball and he's super deep, which I don't know why they're asking him to do that. But that's kind of how, what I want to see. For me, number one is, can you play single high? Can you make plays sideline to sideline? And then, can you do obviously the other things as well? But I need to know, if you're going to play single high, that you can get to either sideline on the deep ball and be helpful, be there. And you also need to have ball skills and turn the ball over and pick it off. He can do all of that, man. He can come up, he can play in the box. He has excellent ball skills. He's a pretty damn good tackler. I really don't have any issues with that. And I think, when it comes up, when he comes up and he's got to play man to man in the slot, I think he can do that just fine too. I mean, I really think that Hafley's salivating over a guy like this. Whether or not Miami will be in position to get him is going to be difficult. Daniel Jeremiah thinks that he's going to have an excellent combine too, which scares the hell out of me because, again, I don't think you take him at 11, but then, you're really killing any hopes and dreams I have for him being available at 43. Emmanuel McNeil-Warren is somebody that constantly gets talked about. He's not the same kind of player. I think he's a little bit more explosive. As I know, I just talked about Thieneman at the combine, but like the way Thieneman plays versus the way Warren plays, I think on the field, Warren is more explosive. I think when he strikes and attacks, he can really sting you with some of these freaking hits, man. And then he's also he's a little bit bigger, I believe. Where yeah, Thieneman's only 6 foot. Emmanuel McNeil Warren 6'2". So and he's long and lanky. So I think like there's a little bit of that gives him an advantage in that area too. So I guess my thing is that. Um, being in the conference that he was in, I would have liked to have seen him probably played a little bit more of a higher level against better competition, just to really see him get tested. I would like to have seen more things where he's one on one in coverage. He kind of just looks like he's roaming around and just kind of makes plays. And like the pick six against Western Kentucky is like the one that sticks out, and I see a lot. It shows him like what he can do, but he's exactly what Eman Wari, right? Like he's a little different, but he's that same kind of role, the player that you're looking for in your defense. So I do think that he's a fit as well. But again, I'm a really big Thieneman fan. And then last one, I won't go too in depth, but Bud Clark falls into that category as well. I think Bud Clark is somebody that Eric and I both like, and he can do a little bit of it all as well. And he's also like he's 6'2", so he's kind of in the middle. And I have seen him cover one on one, and I'm very satisfied with that for the most part. So for me, Thieneman, and if you can get Bud Clark in the third, sign me up.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all of those names that you had here. Like even, looking at my board, right, we talked about 5 safeties there, and that's 1 through 5 on my board. So we're definitely in line with that. Next one coming back to in date again. So he's asking about what do y'all think of Tavondre Sweat now being an opponent the Dolphins interior will now have to face? For me, I don't think that
I love Sweat.
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I love Sweat. I like Sweat, right? I like what he can do in flashes, but I always had questions about his consistency and his ability to do it on a consistent basis. I think that if he had overcome that reputation, there's not a chance in hell that he'd have been traded, right? The guys that are his size and move the way that he does, they you don't just find them walking around the grocery store, right? So there is, I don't want to call it a concern, right? Nothing the Jets do is going to concern me. But when you think about Aaron Brewer and the places that he struggles, right? This is one of those things that you're gonna have to find another way to win when Tavondre Sweat is in there as a 0 or 1 technique with Aaron Brewer in there. But overall, I don't think it's a needle mover in terms of the outcome of a game between the Dolphins and the Jets. But I think I think it says more about the reputation that Sweat has been unable to shake in his transition from Texas to the NFL. Your thoughts on this one, Anthony?
No, the same thing. I mean, honestly, until the Jets prove, that anything they do works and they're competitive, I honestly don't really care too much about what they do. I think Jermaine Johnson's a pretty damn good player, and like you said, Tavondre Sweat, hasn't exactly, I think he's been bad, I guess, from afar, but I don't think he's lived up to what I thought he was going to be, and how, for the reasons I liked him a lot. I think one of the things that does do, considering both of those teams are at the top of the draft, I think it changes kind of what they might be looking at. Where if you thought, the Titans were maybe looking at an edge rusher, and maybe you had projected, a Bailey there if he got to, I think they're at 4, if I'm not mistaken, 5, right? Or I think they're at 4 Titans.
Somewhere in there.
Now that they have an edge rusher, I think maybe they go a different direction, right? And then, for the Jets, I think it completely opens the door for them to go edge rusher now that they've just traded one away. So
Absolutely. All right. Next one, in date again. Not everything will be addressed in this season, right? You talked about that earlier, Anthony. What unit do you all think will be the unit that won't be sufficiently addressed after the draft and free agency? Um, I think that for me, I think it's going to be wide receiver because I think they will make the investments in the edge room. I think that they will make some investments in the secondary as well, and I think they're going to do something at quarterback. And we might get a chance to talk about that here at some point. But when I sit here and look at the question and think about where they may come up short, right? I can see a scenario where we go and use draft picks to fill those other positions, and that wide receiver becomes that position where ends up being a day 3 pick, maybe a couple of scratch off tickets in free agency, and we don't see the household names being added in there. Your thoughts on that question?
I'm gonna go with corner. And I think that's because, and maybe, I'm speaking a little bit for myself, but I did love the comments the other day that I think again came from one of them. But they had mentioned they really liked Jason Marshall, were curious to see what they had there, and they wanted to see Juju Brents get healthy. So it's not like they're looking at this corner room as completely empty of talent. I think that they, do want to see that. And I think they don't maybe necessarily think they need to add a, top notch number one type. Maybe they draft one in the third, where you and I have talked a lot about, a guy like Malik Muhammad, just adding some legit talent to that room, somebody that can play inside, outside. But let's see what we have in house first before we decide that it's garbage and throw it away.
Absolutely. And so that would be more of a position that, we're saying won't be addressed efficiently, but it sounds like that's more a position that you feel like they would be more interested in seeing what they have than just replacing it for the sake of replacing bodies. Indeed, coming in heavy today. So, what are y'all's current day 3 pound the table prospects, acknowledging that it's still early in the process? And we did lose Anthony for a minute there. Looks like he's coming back
Oh,
in.
I'm back.
Yep.
Quick moves.
So next question was just about day 3 pound the table prospects for. Obviously, things are still very fluid through the combine, through pro days. If I look at guys that I have day 3 grades on that I would pound the table for, Max, if he's there in day 3, would be one that I would absolutely do the tackle out of Arizona State. Looking across to some of the other positions, I think there's going to be a cornerback of some sort that falls that I'm going to be very high on, right? I have Keontae Scott as a day 2 guy. I have D'Angelo Pons as a day 2 guy, right? If those type of guys fall into day 3, even a Davis and Igbinosun, that I love Malik Muhammad, right? And his projections seem to be fairly low. If any of those guys would fall day 3, I'd be very excited about that. We talked about Bud Clark earlier. Another safety that I would be I'll put 2 safeties out there. So Genesis Smith and Jacoby Thomas. Those are both players that I really liked their film on. Genesis, I like is more I see his projection in the NFL being more that deep center fielder that has that range. And then Jacoby Thomas is a player that can do a little bit of everything. So those are just a few names out there. Anthony, you and I talked earlier about tight ends a little bit. Oscar Delp, Max Clare, I think are both players that are probably day 3 guys. And I see those as, not move the needle type guys, but the type of guys that give you flexibility, right? Those are both guys that you can line up in the slot. You can line them up as an H-back. They can, be your insert type blockers. There's not going to be your inline Y tight ends. But, I think there's still guys that can bring value to a football team. So do you have some day 3 guys that you want to throw out there?
I'll try to keep it pretty quick, but I had told you about this guy a while back, Jaden Kennedy. He's a nickel / safety from Oregon. I really like him. He's a little bit, undersized, like typical nickel size. He's 5'11", like 185. But I like him a lot. He's very feisty, and he's also got plenty of snaps at, the positions that I think Jeff Hafley's looking for. So I think he fits as well. Just be curious if from a profile perspective, the fact that he's not, 5'11", 6 foot, 200 pounds, if that fits where, Javon Bullard, I know was 5'10" and maybe at 5'10 and a half, but I think he was still up, closer to like 200 pounds, if I'm not mistaken. But he's one that I really like. And then I had mentioned him before, Kendrick Law. I do like him at receiver. And I'm currently just using PFF and kind of looking down later. Again, I don't
Yeah.
know some of the projected rounds, but he's one. And then a last one or two I'll throw at it. Where was it before? Sorry, I apologize. Yeah, man. Well, I'll wrap it up there. Then I won't kill time too much. But yeah, those were guys that I really like. I really like both of them.
So, all right, moving on. Got a couple of more prospects we're being asked about. So Cole Wisniewski, um, not a player that I have watched, but
Nope.
looking at his size, a safety from Texas Tech, 6'4", 220. Um, have you watched Wisniewski?
No, nope, not
Okay.
yet.
Yep. So that's going to be one that we will watch and make sure to check in next week. We'll definitely give our opinions on there. Next one being asked about Eric Gentry. So Gentry is a USC linebacker, not a name that I am necessarily familiar with, but I think that the reason that his name is being tossed around is he measured at 6'7", 221 pounds with a 35-inch arms. I don't, like I said, I haven't watched him, but it definitely makes me wonder, like, where does he fit? Because 6'7" feels a bit tall for an off-ball linebacker. You don't have a lot of them that are anywhere close to that, right? I mean, Sonny Styles coming in at 6'5" was a giant for an off-ball linebacker. And then 221 pounds is very light for an edge. So I haven't watched him, but I will be interested to watch him because I have no idea where you put this guy on the field. Have you watched Gentry?
No, I have a lot of thoughts running through my head now that I hear the 6'7" and whatnot. But yeah, anything I say would be purely just hypothetical and craziness right now.
Yeah, definitely one for both of us to take a look at. Um, Final question that we have in the queue currently. We'll take a couple more if they come in. Going back to IA Figueroa. Thoughts on any notable draft quarterbacks? I don't have anything on draft quarterbacks. Do you?
Um, I haven't watched like the film and dug into any. I can tell you just from afar and who intrigues me because they're intangibles and this and that. I mean, Nussmeyer, just because I think we had really high expectations, and I think that he looked good during the Senior Bowl. Um, Taylor Green, as I mean, he's like all the traits in the world, So very intrigued by him. I actually liked Ty Simpson, at least from what I saw when I was watching. And, I know it's a tale of like two halves, right? He looked completely different, for the first half of the year versus the second half of the year. But again, that's what we do with prospects, right? Is decide, see what they can become and say how often and how consistently can we get that. So, for what it's worth, I did like him. I still wouldn't pick him at 11. Um, but I do like him. So those would just be three guys. I guess I'm intrigued by.
So that kind of takes me into another bullet point that I had for today's show, and that was another thing that Sully had talked about, and that was that he doesn't necessarily want players who are going to be 30 when they sign their second contract. And that kind of, brings into question somebody like Ty Simpson, who is going to turn 24 in December of 2026. So especially if you're talking about a first round quarterback, you're talking picking up a 5th year option, and then you're getting into that range of where you're 30 years old in your second contract. Another player that kind of jumps out when you talk about age, Akeem Mesidor is going to be turning 25 in April of 2026. So, what are your thoughts? I think we're entering kind of a new territory in the NFL with the way that NIL, transfer portal, eligibility, like going kind of crazy at the college level. I think we're going to see more of these older type prospects coming into the NFL. Then you don't want to necessarily, turn your nose up at, right? Before if you stayed in college until you were 24, 25, right, then there was something significantly wrong with you. But in today's world, right, some of these guys can make more money playing college football than they can in the NFL and have the opportunity to be on the field, right? Whereas if they come out at 21 or 22 and they're not quite ready, then they're making less money. They're sitting on the sideline. So I can understand why some of these players would stay. Do you have concern with that yourself, Anthony? And do you agree that we're going to kind of see a bit of a shift to where we have to consider this a little more because we're going to see it more in the college ranks?
Yeah, definitely, and for the exact reasons that you had mentioned. And as far as personally, no, I actually really don't have an issue. Specifically, just we'll use the two prospects that you mentioned, for example. Quarterbacks are playing, till they're 35, 37, 40 years old now. So, I mean, if a guy enters the league at 24 years old, and it takes him, let's say, 4 years to, even develop, then you have him for 28, from 28 until, 38. You have 10 years of, quarterback play, right? If you look at it that way. And then a guy like Akeem Mesidor, I think, and this will translate to other prospects as well and future prospects. But when you look at a guy like that, it's okay if he's entering the draft at 25, it's, well, okay, how quickly is he going to be good, and how much time do I need to, spend in developing him? If it's going to take 3 years to develop him, then no. But if he's kind of ready made and he's going to be a pretty good player and he's going to be, semi impactful, and you can picture him getting starter snaps and, not hurting you, right? Like that kind of vision, then I have no problem with, looking at it and saying he's going to give me 5 really good years if I pick up the 5th year option. And then he's 30 and I decide whether he's worth another, 2 or 3 year contract. And that's it. He knows that he's 30, and, it kind of, again, he's the one that chose to stay and remain in college and make his money on the front end, where, maybe he's didn't realize that he was going to be sacrificing some money on that second contract, that he was, potentially going to get in the NFL. So just kind of, I think it's a little bit of a case by case basis, right? And it really depends on how much development's needed. But I don't have, it doesn't turn me off in, I would say, more situations than not.
Indeed, Oscar Delp's hands worry me, and I get this. I don't, like I said, I don't. We're talking a day 3 guy here in Delp, so I don't need him to be a contested catch type guy. He's got almost kind of a weird consistency that over the past 3 years he's been around 23 catches and 250 yards each one of those seasons. So there is no breakout season for him. And I wouldn't expect him to contribute more than that in the NFL. It's more so the things that he can do when he's not catching the ball that I think give some versatility there. And in date again, you better be here next week, in date, because you're putting all these names out here that we haven't watched, and I'm making notes of them so that we can watch them and try to hit on them next week. Another one that I have not watched, not going to try to pronounce that last name. Anthony, have you watched this guy?
I have not, but I recently heard some good things about him.
Okay. So that's one that we will circle back for next week. What would you change about the NFL combine coverage? Because I have notes.
I love it.
Anything that you can think of off the top of your head that you would change about their coverage?
Yeah, I would make him wear pads. At least shells.
I can see that.
Receivers and quarterbacks and those guys, where it pertains to ball tracking and peripherals and that kind of thing.
That's a good point. And I guess this kind of leads me into another topic that I had, which is your thoughts on players not performing drills at the combine. The big ones that I noticed today was McCoy out of Tennessee, who's a cornerback that's coming back about 13 months off of a torn ACL. I had seen that he was practicing towards the end of the season, but not playing. And then Mansour Delane was another one who's not performing at the combine. I don't know why he's not. Um, but for me, like the combine is essentially a dog and pony show, right? It's underwear Olympics. Um, unless you're a day three guy that's trying to catch the eye of NFL scouts when you have them all. Oh, there we are, a
He heard
weekly
Dog and Pony Show. He said, "I'm here,
um,
buddy."
so I don't NFL teams, the value that they get out of the combine is the ability to sit and meet with these players, right? The interviews, the medicals, all of that stuff. Maybe they see a little bit with the testing, but all of the testing they do at the combine is all stuff that they can do at their pro days as well. So I think that when we're looking at players like a Delane and a McCoy, I think that teams know what they can do on the field. Like, I don't think there's a lot of questions there. For McCoy, it's going to be about, are his movement skills back to where they were close to it pre-injury? But I don't think that skipping the combine and doing that at the pro day changes a team's opinion at all, right? It's just a more controlled situation for McCoy. And same thing with Delane. Like, there is nothing that Mansour Delane could do at the combine that's going to raise his draft stock more than what it is right now. So I don't really have an answer as far as what I would change for the NFL Combine coverage. Right? You can't make these players go out and compete against each other, compete more. Right? I do like the idea of getting some shells on there and making them run in pads because there is a difference with that. Um, but over, I mean, it's akin to the Pro Bowl, right? Like you can get out there and have them do this testing, right? But you don't want to put them in a scenario where they're going to get hurt either, right? Because we're talking about these kids' livelihoods, and there's only so much that you can do in what comes down to, if they were to go to it, one-on-one drills and stuff like that that would translate to the game, but wouldn't put them at risk. So I don't have a great answer as to what I would change about the NFL Combine coverage. Maybe be able to see more of the interviews, right? We see some of these clips come out afterwards of the
I
teams
like that
interviewing the players,
for
right?
us.
And Keon Coleman is a player that I would kind of use for that because I was very high on Keon Coleman from the film that I saw of Coleman. I had him as a borderline first round player on film. Obviously, he didn't play that well, but when I saw the stuff come out of like his interviews and like just the way that he went about things, like I'd have really had a different opinion of him coming out of there if I had seen that ahead of the draft, right? So that would be for me. If I could change one thing about the combine, it would be the ability to, kind of have that interrogator room type camera, being able to watch how these teams are looking at these players, the things they're asking them, that kind of thing. So that would be something I guess that I would be interested in seeing more of.
That would be really cool.
But I kind of went on there for a while. But do you have any concerns with these players that are not performing drills at the combine? Specifically Delane and McCoy. Does that change your opinion of them at all? Just because they're not performing in a fan event, essentially.
And no, I think the combine's useful, for certain reasons, but I really think a lot of guys, I think there's more opportunity to hurt players than it is to help them. So like you said, the two you mentioned, if they don't want to, take the chance at that, then I'm fine with it. I think the NFL and these guys glorify the combine, even though as much as we enjoy it, I think it is glorified more than it should be already. So
And then last topic that I want to hit on before we leave, and I appreciate everybody that had questions in the chat. Love it when
Hey, it was
we,
fun.
I come through and I have my, kind of Cliff Notes version of things that I want to hit on, and the questions that are asked tend to kind of lean into that. And we did most of that. The one thing that we didn't get to that I kind of want to get your thoughts on here, Anthony. We've seen all the talk about Malik Willis in the projections on that contract. Where are you at on Malik Willis?
Listen, if they still believe in him and did it, I would have no problem. Again, we're trying to find a franchise quarterback, and if this is a swing that they took, again, I'm all for it. Now, I would hope that they would do it and be as smart as possible with the way that they set the contract up. And I mean, listen, if he's going to push 35 million, I would really prefer that the contract only be 2 years and have less guaranteed money, right? Or if it is going to be 3 years, I would say design the cap hit to be, the most in year two when Miami maybe has the most cap space, right? So it's hurting you the least. And again, lower the guaranteed money and make sure that there's an out after year two, so that way you can kind of get out and you're not putting yourself back in a situation where you're limited and hamstrung by the cap again and dead cap, and you're doing, we're not doing this again, right? The situation that we're in right now with Tua. So again, I would assume if they do it, they'll be very smart about it. If they weren't, that's a situation where I would be mad.
Yeah, I don't know what smart about it means. It might,
It's a vague term, but I
yeah.
think we know it when we see it. When you get the terms, you say, I like the contract, I don't like the contract, when's the out, how much is guaranteed, that kind of thing.
I think this is a scenario for me that I kind of give Sully and Halfley a blank check on, right? Like I like Willis's film, right? But there's only so much that you can tell from the handful of plays that we saw on NFL Sundays. But this is a player that has been in the building, right? John Eric Sullivan would have been part of that process to acquire him. John Eric Sullivan would have, known that he was planning to interview for GM positions this offseason, and I'm sure been evaluating a player like Willis, right? Halfley was coaching against him the entire season, right? So I give them the blank check in the sense that if they go out there and they decide that Malik Willis, that what they have seen as a franchise quarterback, and they want to go out there and give him 35 to 40 million, I'm okay with it. You better be right if you do that, right? But I'm okay with it. And on the flip side of it as well, right? If this is all media driven and Malik Willis goes and signs with the Jets for 10 million a year, I'm okay with that too, right? If they can sit there and they can make an educated decision and say, right, this is not the guy that we feel is going to be the long-term answer at quarterback, then I'm okay with them passing on it as well. But again, you got to be right. You have more inside knowledge of this player than just about anybody in the NFL. So if you pass on him and he goes to be somebody else's franchise quarterback for the next 10, 15 years, that's going to be a pretty big black mark, right? And the reason that I understand the roster is not necessarily ready for the quarterback today, but you don't get a shot at a franchise quarterback every single season. So if you think that you have a shot at one this year, then you go get it and you protect him as best you can while you build up that roster. But so that's just kind of our opinions there. So we're closing in on an hour and 10 minutes. No more questions in the chat. Good time to wrap it up. If you asked a question or asked about a player that we weren't able to answer, again, come back next week. We try to lead off the show kind of circling back and talking about some of that stuff. I love when we get these type of questions because it always adds some intrigue to the guys that we've been watching. But as always, we appreciate you guys watching, and we'll talk again next week. Going to try to do it on Wednesday next week. I know that I keep saying that and it never comes around, but that's what we're going to shoot for next week. So get your questions ready and let's talk again then.
Thanks, buddy.